The sky bled crimson over Convergence, a once verdant world, now blanketed in ash. Kalira crouched behind the ruins of what might have been a communications tower, her blue skin caked with dirt and dried blood. Her breaths came in ragged gasps as she surveyed the battlefield. Bodies of her fellow Valoran warriors lay scattered among human corpses, their blue skin stark against the gray wasteland. 3 years of war had reduced this planet, the site of first contact between human colony ships and Valoran society, to a graveyard of ash. The humans called it Convergence now, though the Valoran had a different name for it, the Grave of Hope. Kalira's enhanced hearing caught a sound, faint but distinct, a groan, human. She moved silently through the debris, her muscular frame tense with anticipation. Valoran troops had cleared this sector hours ago, but clearly, someone had survived. Her orders were explicit: no prisoners, no survivors. The sound led her to a collapsed structure. Beneath a fallen beam, a human soldier lay pinned, his combat armor cracked and leaking medical fluid. Blood trickled from his mouth, but his eyes, startlingly alert, locked onto hers when she appeared above him. "Kill me," he rasped in accented Valoran. "Just make it quick." Kalira raised her blade, prepared to follow orders as she had for 3 years of brutal conflict. The human didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't close his eyes. He simply stared at her with a determination that made her hesitate. "The others are coming," she said in the human tongue. "They will not be as merciful as I—" A bitter laugh escaped his bloodied lips. "Merciful? Is that what you call this slaughter?" Something in his defiance sparked a feeling Kalira had been trained to suppress: doubt. Commander Thale's voice echoed in her mind. Compassion is weakness. Yet here was this human, facing death with more dignity than many of her own kind. In the distance, she heard Valoran voices approaching. She had seconds to decide. "Your name, human," she demanded. "Alex Reeves, Light Rescue Battalion," he coughed, spattering blood. "Not that it matters anymore." Kalira made her decision, with strength that would have astonished Alex had he been fully conscious. She lifted the massive beam crushing his lower body. He screamed once, then bit it back, determined not to show weakness. "You cannot walk," she observed, noting his mangled leg. "Then leave me. Save yourself the trouble." Instead, she hoisted him onto her shoulder. "Be silent if you wish to live." Alex's protest died in his throat as pain overtook him. Kalira moved away from the battlefield, taking paths only a native Valoran would know. She avoided patrols, ducking behind burned-out vehicles and crumbling structures. The human grew heavier with each step, his breathing becoming more labored. "Why?" he finally managed as they reached the outskirts of the battlefield. Kalira didn't answer. She couldn't. How could she explain a decision she herself didn't understand? They traveled for hours through desolation. Alex drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally muttering names, fellow soldiers, perhaps. His leg dragged uselessly, and a hacking cough had developed from the toxic smoke that perpetually hung in the air. Yet he never complained, never begged for rest. As the red sun began to set, casting an apocalyptic glow over the ravaged landscape, they reached a place Kalira remembered from childhood explorations, before this world became a war zone. A cascading red waterfall, its waters tainted with iron from the mountains, concealed a network of abandoned mining tunnels. "Almost there," she told the barely conscious human. She carried him through the thinning, iron-laden waterfall, into the ancient caverns. Yellow light reflected off the damp stone walls, creating an ethereal glow that was both haunting and hopeful. The deeper they went, the clearer the air became. In the furthest chamber, Kalira found what she hoped would still be there, an ancient cryopod, likely abandoned when the mining operation ceased decades before the war. The technology was old, but appeared functional. She lowered Alex to the ground. His skin had taken on a sickly pallor, but his eyes remained sharp, assessing. "A cryopod," he whispered. "You're preserving me like a specimen?" "I'm saving your life," Kalira replied. "This war, it will not end soon, but perhaps someday." Understanding dawned in Alex's eyes. "You're hiding me. From both sides." Kalira nodded, activating the pod systems. Ancient machinery hummed to life, illuminating the chamber with blue light. "This makes you a traitor to your kind," Alex said. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it makes me more than just a weapon." She helped him into the pod, wincing at his barely suppressed groans of pain. As she prepared to initiate the cryo sequence, Alex grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Why risk everything for an enemy?" Kalira looked into his eyes, human eyes that somehow reflected the same weariness, the same questioning she felt. "Because today, I choose to believe there is more than this endless war." She stepped back and activated the sequence. As the cold mist enveloped him, obscuring his features behind the glass, she whispered, "They will find us. But if not, wake one day and fight alongside me instead." The pod sealed with a hiss, and Alex Reeves, human warrior, disappeared into cryogenic sleep. Kalira stood watching for a long moment, knowing she had sacrificed her honor among the Valoran. She had become a traitor for the slim hope that someday the cycle of violence might be broken. Then she slipped away from the cavern, back to the battlefields, to continue a war that would soon forget her transgression, but not her valor. In the months that followed, Kalira reintegrated into Valoran forces, earning commendations for bravery. Her commanders never discovered her secret. Eventually, she rose through the ranks, her tactical brilliance outshining the brief moment when she had disappeared from the battlefield that fateful day. And then, she vanished from military records. 250 years passed. The planet teetered on the edge of annihilation. The vast region between the ancient mines and the Valoran capital of New Sanctuary had become a wasteland of automated sensors, anti-aircraft grids, and savage scavenger bands. A blue-skinned figure, scarred and weathered by centuries of conflict, made her way across this deadly landscape. General Kalira, once a celebrated war hero, now moved like a ghost through the ruins of a world she had helped destroy. Her destination, a cave that had haunted her dreams for generations. The iron waterfall had long since dried up, replaced by ore extraction pipes. The entrance to the cave was partially collapsed, covered with white lichen. Kalira forced her way through, hoping against hope that the ancient power systems had somehow survived. The cryopod stood exactly as she had left it, dusty but intact. The status light still blinked, a miracle of old technology. Kalira wiped away centuries of grime from the viewing panel and initiated the revival sequence. Systems hummed, louder than she remembered. The pod seal broke with a hiss of escaping air. Inside, Alex Reeves looked exactly as he had 250 years ago, broken, bloody, but alive. He convulsed, gasping as if experiencing his final moments on the battlefield again. The weight of failure and memory crashed over him. "Captain Martinez, fall back to position," he choked out, the phantom voice echoing in his mind. His eyes flew open, unfocused and terrified. Kalira shook him. "Wake up! They found us!" Recognition slowly dawned. "Kaylee," he murmured, using the nickname he'd given her in their brief interaction centuries ago. He stared at her blue face, now lined with scars, the unmistakable marks of centuries lived in conflict. "How long?" he asked, comprehension beginning to take hold. 250 years, she replied. "The war never ended. It only evolved." As Alex struggled to process this information, Kalira explained the current situation. The Valoran species was in peril from internal fracturing. The outer colony corporate front had moved in, capturing satellite stations. Moderate rebels who sought negotiation battled hardliners demanding human extermination. New Sanctuary had become a surveillance fortress. Fingerprint sensors, monitored communications, camera networks tracking every citizen's breath. "Why wake me now?" Alex asked, wincing as he tried to sit up. "Because in 72 hours, everything alive on this planet larger than bacteria will be dead," Kalira said grimly. "The outer colonies have decided on species elimination rather than continued conflict." Alex absorbed this information with the calculation of a soldier. "You need me. Why?" "Because you're the only human who might help us stop this. The only one who's seen both sides of this war from the beginning." They left the cave cautiously, dodging scout flyers that continuously swept the area. Alex, still a combat veteran despite his displacement in time, guided them through the ruins, helping Kalira avoid automated minefields, Valorant patrols, and human scavenger groups. Their journey to New Sanctuary was marked by 3 harrowing combat situations. First, they encountered a 3-way standoff. 2 Valorant squads facing off against a human scavenger team occupying an ancient fortress. Alex predicted the human tactics, while Kalira used Valorant ideals of honor to convince one squad to withdraw, narrowly avoiding a bloodbath. Next came the fluorescent bunker, an old shelter now flooded with glowing blue water. Scavengers with concealed weapons attacked from beneath the surface. Alex used breathing apparatus still functional in his armor to dive, ambushing the attackers and saving Kalira when she was knocked into the depths. The sniper zone proved most challenging, abandoned streets with mirrored glass shards everywhere. Alex traced light reflections to locate a Valorant sniper's position. They lay motionless on concrete rubble for 6 hours, waiting for the Valorant shooter and a human counter-sniper to eliminate each other. "The dead don't seek revenge," Alex whispered, "but the living must be cautious." As they finally approached the edge of New Sanctuary with its hyper-surveillance perimeter, Kalira knew they couldn't simply sneak in. She made a decision. "We surrender," she told Alex. "You as a war prisoner, valuable for interrogation, me as your captor. It's the only way to access the Resistance Council chambers." At the checkpoint, Major Veltar of the Military Police Regiment scrutinized Kalira's data, discovering her legendary status as a missing warrior. Greed flashed in his eyes when he saw Alex alive. Kalira fed him a story. "This is a stubborn enemy. Took me 3 months to track him down." Alex played along, shouting protests, his eyes filled with convincing hatred. Their performance was flawless, creating the perfect illusion of betrayal. At Central Detention, they were separated. Kalira was placed in a political holding cell, confined to a small chamber. Alex was taken to military interrogation. 6 hours later, Commander Thale, Kalira's old mentor, appeared to hear her proposal. Thale was furious, calling her a traitor, reminding her how he had taught her that compassion is weakness. Kalira stood firm, saying, "I handed the enemy a sword to fight alongside us, because one day there would be nothing left to fight for." Discovering her efforts to reach him were meant to create an opening for Alex. Thale reluctantly listened to a military data chip Kalira had hidden in her clothing. It contained human tactics, technology, and the core objectives of the outer colony forces. Thale realized the Valorant were being driven to complete extermination. In an unprecedented move, Thale summoned Alex to the council chambers for explanation, using his ancient battle experience. Alex displayed an orbital map of the colony fleet. He proved this wasn't an invasion but genocide, targeting atmospheric processing systems, water stations, power stations. In 72 hours, nothing larger than bacteria will survive. Tension filled the chamber as council members argued fiercely between hardliners. When one king dies, another rises. And moderates. Is there any option besides self-destruction? The pressure of rational assimilation prevailed. They assigned Alex a special mission: infiltrate the colony command ship and plant a device to disrupt the control network. Few volunteered. Most resigned to death. Alex boarded the stealth scout ship Allure's Edge, accompanied by an elite Valorant squad. The ship cloaked its thermal signature, punching through defensive shields under heavy fire. Alex infiltrated the command ship, neutralizing sensory systems and olfactory detection. He planted charges at control nodes. When the explosions propagated, the control network lost communication, and the colony fleet fell into disarray and panic. At the moment the command ship ceased transmitting orders, Admiral Morrison of the colony forces called a ceasefire. He recognized that, if an infiltrator could get that close to the command ship, all our assumptions are wrong. The fleet withdrew, postponing the genocide campaign. In the Valorant capital, the ceasefire signal reached the council, shifting from 6 hours remaining to all hostile activities temporarily suspended. Senator Kadesh, the hardline advocate, sat stunned. Valorant civilians and Outer Island Marines, now recognizing a common goal, began withdrawing from orbit. 3 weeks later, Kalira returned to the original cave. The cryopod miraculously still functioned. She placed Alex's blood-stained armor inside and said, "I am no longer a weapon." She activated the preservation sequence for the armor. Beside it lay a memorial to Alex's actions. The cryostation warriors awakened. Groups of Valorant and human soldiers preserved from years past emerged into the cold sunlight. Initially disoriented, when they encountered Alex lying motionless in a regeneration chamber. Velkos, a former Valorant sergeant who had lost his entire squad, tentatively extended his hand. "I cannot yet forgive," he said, "but we can cooperate rather than destroy." Alex's presence, conceptually, clasped Velkos's hand. Then light flashed, like a covenant to rebuild peace. World reconstruction scenes followed. Though humanity had largely migrated away, some human families remained on the planet, working with Valorant to rebuild atmospheric processing systems, water stations, and power plants. Children of both species played with bomb fragments fashioned into toy swords. Final dialogue. Kalira watched Alex's memory form at a construction site. If they want war again someday, we remind them that the choice for peace always exists. Every day, every moment. Alex smiled. Peace isn't victory. It's a habit, restarted each day. The red sky of convergence was slowly changing. For the first time in centuries, hints of blue began to appear between the crimson clouds. The day Kalira found Alex Reeves under the collapsed beam had been no different from countless others in the 3-year conflict. Smoke choked the air, and the perpetual ash made every breath a struggle. Yet, something had changed inside her when she looked into the eyes of her enemy and saw not a monster, but a mirror. "Your wound is severe," she told him, as they made their way through the outskirts of the battlefield. Her sensitive hearing, constantly alert for patrols of either side. Alex clenched his teeth against the pain. "Why don't you just kill me and be done with it? Your commanders would reward you." "My commanders would expect nothing less," she agreed. "But I have seen enough death to last lifetimes." They passed a field of charred bodies, human soldiers caught in a Valorant plasma barrage. Alex's face hardened at the sight, but he said nothing. Both had witnessed too many such scenes to feign shock anymore. "The Iron Falls are ahead," Kalira said, adjusting her grip on the wounded human. "An ancient place, forgotten by both our kinds." Alex studied her face. The blue skin stretched tight with exhaustion. "You've been there before. As a child, before your colony ships arrived, before this world became convergence." The iron waterfall came into view, a cascade of rust-red water flowing from mineral-rich mountains. The liquid was thin, almost metallic, but not toxic. Kalira guided them through it, the cold shock making Alex gasp. Inside the cave network, luminescent fungi provided dim lighting. The air grew clearer, a blessed relief from the perpetual smoke outside. Natural caverns gave way to manufactured tunnels, evidence of mining operations long abandoned. "Your leg requires treatment," Kalira observed as she set Alex down in the deepest chamber. "The cryopod will stabilize you, but your injuries are beyond my skill." "Cryosleep," Alex murmured, eyeing the ancient device. "I'd be completely at your mercy." Kalira checked the pod systems. "You already are." A silence stretched between them, enemy warriors in a moment outside of war. "If I survive this," Alex finally said, "what then? I wake to continued war, to interrogation, execution?" Kalira's hands stilled on the control panel. "I don't know. But today, you don't die. Perhaps tomorrow holds something different for us both." She helped him into the pod, his uniform torn and bloody, his breathing labored from internal injuries. As the clear cover began to lower, their eyes met one final time. "My squad called me Reeves," he said. "Not Alex." "Rest, Reeves," she replied. "The war will wait." The cold mist enveloped him, and the pod initiated its preservation sequence. Kalira stood watching until his features froze in suspended animation. Then she turned away, knowing her absence from the battlefield would soon be noticed. "We will meet again," she promised the silent chamber. "In a better world, perhaps." The journey back to Valoran lines was arduous. Kalira manufactured a story about pursuing human stragglers, embellishing it with enough tactical details to satisfy her superiors. No one questioned the blood on her uniform. It was a common sight. Within days, she was back on the front lines, fighting the very species she had chosen to save. Decades passed. The war expanded beyond convergence to neighboring systems. Kalira rose through military ranks, her tactical brilliance earning her respect and authority. Yet, she never forgot the cave or its silent occupant. Twice, during rare leaves, she made the dangerous journey to check on the cryopod. Its systems continued to function, drawing power from geothermal sources deep within the planet. Then came the internal fracturing. The Valoran, once united against humanity, began to splinter. Political factions arose, hardliners demanding total human extermination, moderates seeking negotiated settlements. The conflict that had begun as a straightforward territorial dispute evolved into a complex, multi-front war with shifting alliances. By the time 2 centuries had passed, Kalira had become General Kalira, her body augmented with regenerative technology that extended her lifespan far beyond normal Valoran limits. She had seen too much death, too many strategies, too many leaders rise and fall. The idealism of her youth had hardened into pragmatic determination. And then came the news that changed everything. The Outer Colony Corporate Front, a human faction that had broken from Earth's authority, had developed a planetary cleansing protocol. Their target, convergence, the symbol of the original conflict. Kalira understood immediately what this meant. Not tactical defeat, extinction. After 250 years of fighting, the final solution was approaching, and it would spare neither human nor Valoran on the contested planet. She knew then that it was time to return to the cave. The landscape had changed dramatically over the centuries. What had once been battlefield was now automated defense perimeter. The iron waterfall had dried up as mining operations diverted the water table. But Kalira remembered the way. Inside the cave, she found the cryopod covered in mineral deposits, but still functioning, a testament to ancient engineering. She cleared the viewing panel and looked upon the face that had haunted her for centuries, unchanged, untouched by time, while she had become something else entirely. The revival sequence was slow. Systems that had maintained stasis for 250 years required time to reverse the process. Kalira waited, her hand resting on her weapon, a habit after centuries of combat. When Alex finally stirred, his body convulsed as neural pathways reactivated. His eyes opened wide, filled with the terror of his last conscious moments on the battlefield. "Captain Martinez," he gasped. "Heavy fire from the North Ridge, we can't—" He broke off, confusion replacing panic as he registered his surroundings. Kalira leaned over him. "They found us. Wake up." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Kaylee," he whispered, using the nickname he'd created during their brief conversation centuries ago. Then his gaze sharpened, taking in her aged appearance, the network of scars across her blue skin. "How long?" 250 years, she replied simply. Alex struggled to sit up, wincing at muscles atrophied despite the pod's preservation. "The war never ended. But it's about to." She helped him out of the pod, supporting his weight as his legs threatened to buckle. "We have 3 days before everything on this planet dies." As Alex regained his strength, Kalira explained how the conflict had evolved. Internal Valoran factions fighting each other, while human colony interests became increasingly fragmented. The current threat came from the Outer Colony corporate front, a human faction that saw total planetary cleansing as the most cost-effective solution to the centuries-old stalemate. They've positioned orbital weapons platforms to target every atmospheric processor, water treatment facility, and power station simultaneously, she explained. Without infrastructure, the atmosphere becomes toxic within hours. Every living thing larger than microbes will suffocate. Alex absorbed this grimly. "And you woke me because you're unique. A human who's seen the beginning of this war, who knows what we've lost. And because I've spent 250 years wondering if I made the right choice that day." He studied her face, noting the weariness behind her military bearing. "You saved my life. I'm not sure I deserved it." "That remains to be seen," she replied. "Can you walk?" "Lead the way, General." He nodded at the insignia on her armor. "I see you've been promoted since we last met." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "A few times." They exited the cave cautiously. The landscape that greeted Alex was even more devastated than the battlefield he remembered. The perpetual red sky now held streaks of sickly green, evidence of atmospheric degradation. Distant explosions periodically lit the horizon. "New sanctuary lies 20 kilometers east," Kalira said, indicating the Valoran capital. "It's the only place with access to orbital defense systems that might counter the attack." "And how do we get there? I'm guessing we can't just walk up and knock." "We fight our way through, like we've both been doing for centuries, or in your case, before your long nap." Alex's military training kicked in despite his disorientation. He quickly assessed their resources, the terrain, potential threats. Patrols? Automated sensors every half-kilometer. Drone sweeps hourly. Ground forces, both Valoran military and human scavenger bands. Weapons. Kalira handed him a compact energy pistol. "Not standard issue from your time, I imagine." Alex examined it, finding the trigger mechanism intuitive despite the advanced technology. "I'll manage." Their journey began in silence, both warriors falling into the rhythm of survival. Alex marveled at how quickly his body remembered combat movement patterns despite centuries in stasis. His muscles ached, but adrenaline and necessity drove him forward. The first challenge came at an ancient fortress, once a human outpost, now occupied by scavengers. 2 Valoran military squads had surrounded it, preparing for assault. "We can't go around," Kalira whispered, as they observed from cover. "The valley beyond is the only passage through the sensor grid." Alex studied the tactical situation. "The scavengers have rigged the east wall with explosives. They're hoping to draw your people in, then detonate." Kalira raised an eyebrow. "How can you tell?" "The pattern of defenders. Too few on that side. It's bait." She nodded, impressed despite herself. "So what do we do?" "Create a third option." Alex pointed to a Valoran officer commanding one of the squads. "That one. He wears the insignia of the 7th Claw. They still follow the old honor codes?" "Commander Vrex. Yes, tradition runs deep in the 7th. Then talk to him. Appeal to warrior honor. Suggests that engaging scavenger traps is beneath their dignity. Kalira considered this. And while I do that, I circle behind, create a distraction near the west wall. Make it look like the scavengers are attempting a breakout. The second squad will redirect there, leaving us a path through the middle, Kalira finished. It could work. They separated, each moving with the stealth of experienced combatants. Kalira approached the Valoran commander openly, her rank insignia prominently displayed. Alex crept toward the western flank, utilizing rubble and shadow. The plan worked better than expected. Commander Vrex, recognizing General Kalira despite her notorious disappearance years earlier, agreed that honorable warriors should not waste lives on scavenger tricks. When Alex triggered a series of small explosions near the west wall, the second Valoran squad rushed to intercept what they believed was an escape attempt. Kalira and Alex slipped through the momentary gap in coverage, entering the valley beyond before any faction realized they had passed. Well executed, Kalira acknowledged, as they put distance between themselves and the three-way standoff. Basic tactics, Alex shrugged. Create confusion among opposing forces to generate an opportunity. Some things don't change, even across centuries. The second obstacle proved more challenging. Their path led through an ancient emergency bunker, now partially flooded with eerie blue-glowing water. Bioluminescent algae, Kalira explained. Adapted to radiation levels after the orbital bombardments of the Second Phase War. Beautiful, Alex commented, and probably dangerous. The water itself is safe enough. What lives in it, less so. They needed to cross the flooded chamber to reach the passage beyond. As they waded in, the water reaching their waists, Alex noticed movement beneath the glowing surface. We're not alone, he whispered. Kalira nodded grimly. Scavengers often use these flooded areas for ambush. The attack came suddenly, figures erupting from beneath the water, weapons raised. Alex reacted instinctively, using a breathing apparatus still functional in his ancient armor, to dive beneath the surface. The scavengers, focused on Kalira, didn't notice him disappearing. Underwater, the blue glow created an alien landscape. Alex could make out the legs of attackers, their positions revealed by ripples and currents. He moved silently, years of combat training overcoming his disorientation. Above, Kalira fought with the precision of centuries of warfare. Her movements were economical, lethal, but outnumbered 5-1. Even she couldn't avoid every attack. A heavy blow sent her tumbling into the deeper section of the flooded chamber. Alex struck then, emerging behind the scavengers, disabling two before they realized he existed. The distraction allowed Kalira to resurface and engage the others. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. You swim well for a human, she observed as they climbed out of the glowing water on the far side. You fight well for someone who's been in combat for 2.5 centuries, he countered. A rare smile crossed her scarred face. Practice makes perfect. The most dangerous challenge came in the urban ruins approaching New Sanctuary. Once a thriving suburb, the area was now a sniper's paradise, collapsed buildings with countless windows, mirrored glass shards everywhere, creating unpredictable reflection patterns. Valoran military uses this zone as a training ground for marksmen, Kalira explained as they surveyed the deadly landscape. Anyone attempting to approach the city without clearance is considered target practice. Alex studied the terrain with a tactician's eye. The Valoran aren't the only ones using this zone. Kalira followed his gaze to a subtle disruption in dust patterns on a distant rooftop. Human counter-snipers? Scavenger elites? Probably. They'd establish positions to ambush your trainees. So we have multiple hostile snipers, all waiting for movement. Alex nodded. And we need to cross approximately 1 kilometer of open ground with minimal cover. They formulated a plan based on patience rather than speed, moving only during momentary distractions, falling debris, distant explosions, brief cloud cover when the toxic atmosphere created condensation patterns. Progress was agonizingly slow. At one point, they remained motionless for 6 hours, pressed against concrete rubble, waiting for a Valorant sniper to shift position. Alex tracked the shooter's location by the faint reflection from his scope, visible only at certain angles when light struck the glass just right. "The dead don't seek revenge," Alex whispered during their vigil. "But the living must be cautious." Kalira glanced at him. "A human saying?" "Something my squad used to repeat. Patience keeps you alive longer than speed in certain situations." Eventually, they witnessed what they'd been waiting for. A human counter-sniper attempting to eliminate the Valorant marksman. The brief exchange of fire created their opportunity to advance. After nearly 20 hours of incremental movement, they reached the edge of New Sanctuary's security perimeter. Here, the landscape changed dramatically. Automated scanners, biometric checkpoints, and constant surveillance made stealth impossible. "We can't sneak through," Kalira stated flatly. "The system would detect us instantly." "So what's the alternative?" She turned to face him fully. "We surrender. Strategically." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "I turn you in as a captured enemy combatant. Extremely valuable for interrogation. Myself as your captor. And once inside, I still have contacts in the military hierarchy. One in particular who might listen, if he doesn't execute me first for desertion." Alex considered this. High risk. Everything about this is high risk. But it's our only path to the Resistance Council chambers, where decisions about planetary defense are made. At the primary checkpoint, they enacted their plan. Kalira approached openly, restraining Alex as if he were a prisoner. Major Veltar of the Military Police Regiment processed their entry, his eyes widening as he scanned Kalira's identification. "General Kalira, you were reported missing 3 years ago, presumed dead or defected. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." "Major," she replied smoothly, "I've been on deep reconnaissance. This human has information critical to planetary security." Veltar's gaze shifted to Alex, naked greed in his expression. A living human prisoner was rare enough to advance any officer's career. "This is a stubborn enemy," Kalira continued, feeding the narrative. "Took me 3 months to track him down." Alex played his role perfectly, struggling against restraints and shouting invectives in broken Valoran. His performance convinced Veltar, who eagerly processed their entry into the city. Once inside, however, they were separated. Kalira was escorted to a political holding cell, her long absence raising suspicions despite her rank. Alex was taken to military interrogation. 6 hours passed before Commander Thale arrived at Kalira's cell. Though aged considerably, she recognized her former mentor immediately. The hard lines of his face had only deepened with time. "So the prodigal returns," he said coldly, "with a human pet, no less." Kalira stood at military attention despite her prisoner status. "Commander, thank you for seeing me. I came to witness your shame personally. My star pupil, who once showed such promise, now consorting with the enemy. The enemy has changed, Commander, as has the nature of our conflict." Thale circled her cell, contempt evident in every movement. "Has it? Humans still seek to destroy us. We still fight for survival. What has changed except your loyalty?" "Everything has changed. We're no longer fighting for territory or resources. We're facing extinction, both our species." "Melodramatic as always, Kalira. I taught you better than this. Compassion is weakness." She met his gaze steadily. "You taught me to protect our people at all costs. That's exactly what I'm doing." Their verbal sparring continued, Thale probing for the real reason behind her return. Finally, Kalira revealed the data chip hidden in her uniform, containing human military intelligence she claimed to have extracted from Alex. "Information freely given is worthless," Thale scoffed. "Not when extinction is the alternative," Kalira countered. "Listen to what he knows, then decide." Reluctantly, Thale agreed to review the data, What he found disturbed him deeply. Detailed plans for the outer colony's planetary cleansing protocol, targeting every life support system simultaneously. The timeline: less than 70 hours remaining. Against all protocol, Thale authorized Alex's transfer to the Resistance Council chambers for direct testimony. The council, comprising military leaders, political representatives, and civilian authorities, had been debating response strategies to the outer colony threat for weeks without resolution. Alex entered the chamber in restraints, but his bearing remained military despite his weakened condition. The council members regarded him with mixtures of hostility, curiosity, and disguised fear. "This human claims to have critical intelligence about the outer colony offensive," Thale announced. "Given the urgency of our situation, the council will hear him." Alex wasted no time on pleasantries. "Your planet has approximately 72 hours before complete biosphere collapse. The outer colonies aren't planning a conventional attack. They're implementing extinction protocols." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Senator Kadesh, leader of the hardline faction, stood in protest. "Why should we believe anything from a human mouth? This could be misinformation to weaken our defenses." "Because I have nothing to gain by lying," Alex replied calmly. "I've been in cryostasis for 250 years. The human civilization I knew is gone. The outer colonies view the remaining humans on this planet as expendable, collaborators with the enemy." He requested access to the holographic display system. When granted, he mapped out the approaching fleet's orbital positions, highlighting their targeting patterns. "These aren't military targets," he explained. "They're targeting atmospheric processors first, then water purification systems, power distribution nodes. The strategy isn't conquest, it's sterilization." Premier Kadesh remained unconvinced. "When one king dies, another rises. This changes nothing about our resistance." "It changes everything," countered Council Member Linza, one of the moderate voices. "What options remain besides mutual destruction?" The debate raged, factions arguing while the countdown continued. Alex stood silently, observing the political dynamics that would determine millions of lives. Finally, he spoke again. "There is another option. The Outer Colony command ship, here." He indicated a position on the display. "It coordinates the entire attack network. Disable it, and the synchronization fails. They'd be forced to postpone or abandon the operation." "And how do you propose we accomplish this?" Thale asked. "Our remaining fleet couldn't penetrate their defensive screen." "Not a fleet. A single stealth insertion. One ship, one team, one objective." The room fell silent as the implication became clear. "You're volunteering for a suicide mission," Kalira stated. Alex met her gaze. "I've been dead to my own world for centuries. Might as well make this life count for something." After hours of deliberation, the council approved the desperate plan. The stealth scout ship Allure's Edge was prepared, the most advanced infiltration vessel in the Valoran arsenal. A small team of elite Valoran operatives would accompany Alex, though few volunteered. Most believed the mission impossible. As they prepared to board, Kalira found Alex checking his equipment. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You've already lived through one apocalypse." He continued his methodical preparation. "Actually, I do. For 250 years. You kept me alive for some purpose. Maybe this is it." "I didn't save you just to watch you die." Alex finally looked up, a smile ghosting across his features. "Then I'd better not die." The Allure's Edge departed under cover of a localized electromagnetic storm, a common occurrence in Convergence's degraded atmosphere. The ship's stealth systems rendered it nearly invisible, its thermal signature masked, its propulsion silent. Breaking through the orbital defense grid required precision, flying through gaps in sensor coverage. Twice, they narrowly avoided patrol vessels. As they approached the massive colony command ship, they witnessed the scale of the threat. Dozens of weapons platforms positioning for the synchronized attack. "Approach vector calculated," The Valorant pilot announced. Insertion point identified. We'll have a 3-minute window before their sweep patterns detect anomalies. Alex studied the schematic of the command ship. Get me to this access point. The rest is my problem. The insertion went flawlessly. The Allure's Edge approached from the command ship's blind spot, its signature lost in the background radiation of nearby stellar phenomena. Alex, equipped with a modified environment suit and demolition charges, transferred across the short void between vessels. Inside the command ship, he moved with practiced stealth. The human design was different from what he remembered from his era, but military logic remained consistent across centuries. Critical systems protected, access routes minimized, security checkpoints predictable. He bypassed biometric scanners using technology Kalira had provided, Valorine adaptations of human security systems. The ship's olfactory detection systems, designed to identify non-human intruders, failed to register his presence thanks to chemical masking agents. Alex reached the primary control nexus, the brain of the coordinated attack system. Here, he placed the first of his charges, calibrating it to disable rather than destroy. Similar devices were positioned at secondary control nodes throughout the command level. When the final charge was set, Alex transmitted a simple coded signal to the Allure's Edge. Packages delivered, countdown initiated. The first explosion caught the command crew completely by surprise. Alarms blared as systems began failing in cascading sequence. The carefully orchestrated attack coordination dissolved into chaos as communication between platforms broke down. Admiral Morrison, commander of the Outer Colony Forces, recognized the catastrophic failure unfolding around him. Unlike many military leaders, he understood the implications immediately. If an infiltrator could penetrate this far into our command structure, all our assumptions about Valorant capabilities are wrong. He ordered an emergency channel opened to the Valorant Council. This is Admiral Morrison of the Outer Colony Fleet. We are standing down aggressive operations pending reassessment. I propose immediate ceasefire negotiations. In New Sanctuary, the Council watched in disbelief as the countdown clocks, showing 6 hours to atmospheric failure, suddenly shifted to all hostile activities temporarily suspended. Senator Kadesh, who had argued most vehemently for continued resistance regardless of cost, sat in stunned silence. The Allure's Edge, having completed its mission, attempted extraction, but heavy defensive fire made approach impossible. Communications indicated that Alex remained aboard the command ship, his status unknown. 3 weeks passed. The immediate crisis had been averted, with Outer Colony forces withdrawing to neutral space for negotiations. Both sides recognized that mutual destruction benefited neither species. Preliminary talks began, tentative but hopeful. Kalira returned to the cave, where her journey with Alex had begun 250 years earlier. The ancient cryopod still functioned, a miracle of engineering and persistence. She placed Alex's blood-stained armor inside, a relic of the conflict that had consumed generations. "I am no longer a weapon," she whispered, as she activated the preservation sequence. "Neither are you." Beside the pod, she created a small memorial, not just to Alex, but to all those lost in centuries of needless conflict. As she completed this ritual, a communication reached her. Unusual activity detected at Cryostation Epsilon, an abandoned medical facility from the early war years. There, something extraordinary was happening. Cryopods long forgotten were activating. Their occupants, both Valoran and human soldiers preserved from the original conflicts, awakening to a world transformed. Among them was Velkos, once a Valoran sergeant who had lost his entire squad to human artillery. As these warriors from the past struggled to comprehend their new reality, word spread of the human who had prevented planetary extinction. When Velkos encountered a regeneration chamber containing Alex's severely injured but living form, the Valoran veteran hesitated, then slowly extended his hand. "I cannot yet forgive," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But we can cooperate rather than destroy." The symbolic gesture, former enemies choosing collaboration over continued hatred, rippled through both communities. Though most humans had long since evacuated Convergence for other worlds, the families who remained began working alongside Valorant teams to rebuild atmospheric processors, water treatment facilities, and power distribution networks. Most poignant were the children, blue-skinned Valorant youngsters playing alongside human children, fashioning toy swords from fragments of bombs, creating games rather than weapons from the detritus of war. Months later, as recovery efforts progressed, Kalira stood watching a mixed construction crew. Beside her, Alex's presence lingered, whether memory, projection, or something more spiritual. Even she couldn't say. "If they want war again someday," she murmured, "we remind them that the choice for peace always exists. Every day, every moment." The presence smiled. Peace isn't victory. It's a habit, restarted each day. Above them, through breaks in the perpetual red clouds, patches of blue sky had begun to appear, the first in centuries. Convergence was healing, slowly but surely, as were its people. The ancient cryopod in the cave remained, preserved now as a monument, not to war, but to the moment when compassion overcame hatred, when one Valorant soldier chose to save a human enemy, setting in motion events that would eventually save them all. And in that cave, where it had all begun, new life took root, luminescent fungi spreading across walls that had once witnessed only desperation and fear. Light emerging from darkness, hope from despair, peace from centuries of war. The cycle at last was broken. Wah! When Kalira first carried Alex through the iron waterfall into the abandoned mining tunnels, she had acted on instinct rather than calculation. The compassion she showed that day, saving an enemy soldier, despite everything her culture had taught her, would ripple across centuries, eventually changing the fate of an entire world. Now, as she stood at the edge of a construction site where Valorant and human workers labored side by side to rebuild an atmospheric processor, she could barely recognize the planet once called Convergence. The perpetual red sky had begun to clear in patches, revealing the natural blue that had been hidden for generations. General Kalira, a young Valorant engineer, approached, respectfully saluting. "The Eastern Quadrant is operational. Oxygen levels have increased 3% this week alone." "Excellent work, Tarian," she replied. "And the water purification systems?" "Human technicians finished the calibrations yesterday. We're at 60% capacity and rising." Kalira nodded, satisfaction evident despite her military bearing. 3 months had passed since the averted genocide, since Alex's desperate mission aboard the colony command ship. 3 months of tentative cooperation between species that had known only conflict for 250 years. The hardest part hadn't been the technical challenges of planetary restoration. It had been overcoming centuries of ingrained hatred. Both sides had committed atrocities. Both had legitimate grievances. But facing extinction had provided clarity. Continue fighting and ensure mutual destruction, or cooperate and survive. "There's someone who wishes to speak with you," Tarian added hesitantly. "At the memorial site." The memorial had been established at the entrance to the cave, where Alex had spent his centuries in cryosleep. Now, a place of reflection, it contained artifacts from the long conflict, preserved as reminders of what must never happen again. Kalira made her way there, passing groups of children playing in a field that had once been a battlefield. Blue-skinned Valorant youngsters, alongside human children, using metal scraps from old weapons to build structures rather than destroy them. At the memorial entrance stood Velkos, the Valorant sergeant, who had awakened from cryosleep with other forgotten soldiers weeks earlier. His face still bore the hardness of a warrior, but something had changed in his eyes. "General," he greeted her formally. "Thank you for coming." "You wish to speak with me?" Velkos gestured toward the cave. "Walk with me." Inside, illuminated by the natural bioluminescence of the cavern fungi. They passed displays of battle relics, weapons, armor, communications devices spanning centuries of conflict. At the center stood the original cryopod that had preserved Alex through the generations. Now empty, but maintained as a symbol. "I lost my entire squad to human artillery in the Battle of Eastern Ridge," Velkos said abruptly. "For decades in cryosleep, I dreamed of revenge. When I awoke and learned what had happened, that a human had saved our world, I couldn't accept it." Kalira remained silent, allowing him to continue. "Yesterday, I worked alongside humans replacing filtration systems in the northern sector. Their children brought water to the workers, both human and Valoran. One small human girl gave me this." He opened his hand, revealing a crudely fashioned flower made from twisted metal. "She said it was a gift to new friends." His voice roughened. "I realized then that I had been preserved from the past for a purpose, not to continue old hatreds, but to help build something new, just as you preserved the human warrior." "Alex," Kalira supplied. "His name was Alex Reeves." "Yes, Alex." Velkos tested the name carefully. "The human medics say he may yet recover, though the damage was extensive." Hope flickered briefly across Kalira's face before she controlled her expression. "His survival would be significant for continued relations between our peoples." "It would." Velkos hesitated, then asked the question many had wondered but few dared voice. "Why did you save him that day, General? 250 years ago, when our directive was clear. No prisoners, no survivors." Kalira gazed at the empty cryopod, seeing not its current state, but the moment she had sealed Alex inside, centuries earlier. "He asked me to kill him," she said finally. But his eyes held no fear, only determination. "I saw something in him that mirrored what I felt. Weariness with endless death, yet unwillingness to surrender. In saving him, perhaps I was trying to save something in myself." "A single act of compassion that eventually saved millions," Velkos observed. "Or simple defiance of orders that happened to yield unexpected results," Kalira countered. "History will decide which narrative prevails." They exited the cave, emerging into the changing light of convergence. In the distance, a mixed group of Valeran and human technicians calibrated atmospheric sensors. Above them, the red sky continued its slow transformation, blue patches expanding day by day. "Will you continue to serve on the Unity Council?" Velkos asked, as they walked back toward the construction site. The council, formed from members of both species after the crisis, had replaced the old Resistance Council. Its mission cooperation rather than conflict. "As long as I'm needed," Kalira replied. "Though I've spent enough centuries in military service, perhaps it's time for new leadership. You're a symbol to both our peoples now, the Valoran general who saved a human warrior, who together prevented extinction." Kalira shook her head. "Symbols become burdens. I would rather be remembered as someone who recognized when to set aside weapons than someone skilled at wielding them." As they reached the construction site, a commotion drew their attention. A medical transport had arrived, technicians carefully unloading equipment. Among them, supported by two assistants, was a figure Kalira recognized instantly, despite his weakened state. Alex Reeves stood unsteadily, his body still recovering from massive trauma sustained during his mission aboard the colony command ship. His eyes, however, remained as alert and determined as the day she had found him beneath the collapsed beam 250 years earlier. Their gazes met across the distance. No words were necessary. Their shared journey, spanning centuries, spoke volumes. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her presence, then turned his attention to the atmospheric processor, already discussing technical specifications with the engineers. "He doesn't waste time," Velkos observed. "He slept for 250 years," Kalira replied. I imagine he feels he has catching up to do. Later, as the dual suns of convergence began to set, casting purple-orange light across the construction site, Kalira found Alex sitting alone, watching the horizon. The medical team says you shouldn't be exerting yourself, she noted, joining him. The medical team has never been in cryostasis for 2.5 centuries, he countered. Standard protocols don't apply. A comfortable silence settled between them, two veterans of a war that had defined and transformed them both. The children were playing with pieces of an old plasma cannon today, Alex finally said. Making art instead of weapons. There's something profoundly right about that. Transformation of purpose, Kalira agreed. Like us. He glanced at her. Are we transformed, Kaylee, or just tired? Perhaps both. Exhaustion can lead to wisdom if we're paying attention. Alex smiled slightly, a rare expression for him. Philosophical in your old age. Occupational hazard of living for centuries, she replied. You start to recognize patterns. And what pattern are we in now? Kalira considered this, watching as lights came on in the settlement below, a community of humans and Valorin living side by side, rebuilding what generations of conflict had destroyed. Renewal, she decided. Difficult, uncertain, but possible. In the growing twilight, the atmospheric processor hummed to life, its filtering systems beginning another cycle of cleansing. Small flakes of ash, remnants of the old convergence, still occasionally fell, but less each day as the atmosphere gradually healed. If they want war again someday, Kalira said softly, we remind them that the choice for peace always exists. Every day, every moment. Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. Peace isn't victory. It's a habit, restarted each day. Above them, as darkness fell, stars became visible, many for the first time in generations, as the perpetual ash clouds continued to dissipate. New constellations for a world being reborn, guided by warriors who had chosen to become builders instead. The cycle, at last, was broken, and in its place, something new had begun.